Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, where we are once again on Foliax and it is still raining. In today's video we're going to have a bit of a look through how the various different science packs are produced and the various different bits and pieces that went into making those. Last time, as you probably remember, we looked into how all of the different tree types are grown and then how we're taking all of the resources from those trees, bringing them down these long belts and then feeding them into a series of foundries where they're being made into actual resources that we can use in a slightly more normal way. So along here we have tungsten bars, we have uranium bars, we have cheese bars, we have rainbow bars, we have aluminium, no, that's probably not aluminium, I don't know, that might be zinc, and so on and so on. But today we're going to look at what we're actually doing with all of those different resources once we've made them. The first step to making science packs is having something to put the actual science juice itself into, and so we're making a load of these flasks along here. These are research bottles and they're made out of glass. Lovely. Now the glass is made on this planet by bringing in the obsidian bar and some water, and that allows you to produce a load of glass plates. It's worth noting that glass is distinct from glass, which is distinct from glass, which is distinct from glass, which is distinct from glass. Yes, this is a little bit ridiculous. There are at least 5 different types of glass in this game. Granted, one of them is magic glass, and so that's at least got a completely different name. This one is glass panels, which are apparently made out of barrels of sand, although they can be made on Igris out of pure sand. Oh, and magic glass, interesting, that's slightly different. This one is another type of glass that's made out of silica sand, and this is your standard type of glass, which is made out of standard sand. So yeah, this is one of the downsides of having lots and lots of mod packs all in one big pile without having somebody to go through and sort of tidy them up a little bit and sort of try and make them make sense. So yes, despite the fact that we have a ready supply of stone on this planet, we can't turn it into sand and turn that into glass. We have to instead make the glass out of the obsidian, which in a way would actually sort of work even if the recipes were the same, because whilst we do have a supply of stone on this planet, when we first arrived here we wouldn't have any way to turn it into sand, and so that other recipe wouldn't work. So even if it was the same type of glass, we'd be able to make it from obsidian instead and it would be more or less the same. But that level of integration hasn't been done, and so we're just gonna roll with it and not worry about it too much, because it's a fairly standard thing that we're kind of aware of and is a thing that crops up every so often and we're just trying to sort of ignore. So that is indeed making the glass bottles for us to put the research juice into. Lovely. And also then we're taking the glass out and we're putting it onto the bus down here. It can then flow over this way, and then we're using some assembly machines to turn the glass into glass fibres. Now I feel that's another thing that possibly should be done in a foundry, because you need quite a lot of heat to turn glass into glass fibres, but never mind. Anyway, we need glass fibres apparently, and we're then making bioresin in the next set of machines, and that's done by taking in spoilage and water and sort of macerating it around a bit, I guess, and then and you can produce some resin from it, which is the important thing here. The resin is then combined with the glass fibre in order to make fiberglass boards, or also known as blank circuit boards, but made out of fiberglass. That seems pretty fair, actually. I'm happy with that recipe because that's pretty, you know, that's kind of realistic. And also these stages of going through making all the different parts of the circuit board before you put them together, rather than just saying, yes, you combine some iron and some copper, reminds me a lot of Angel Bob's, and in quite a nice way, because I did like the way that Angel Bob said, okay, so you want to make a circuit board, but you can't just smack a couple of pieces of metal together. That isn't going to work. We're going to make you go through and make the components, make the resistors, make the capacitors, make the circuit board substrate, and so on and so on and so on, and then combine them all together in some sort of electronics crafting machine in order to make the actual circuits themselves. And I thought that was quite nice, and granted it's far too complicated for normal vanilla Factorio. Nobody wants to be starting to play Factorio and the sort of the 4th recipe they have to make involves 20 different sub-steps in order to get to it. But for something like Angel Bob's, where the whole point is that everything is made a lot more complicated and a bit more realistic, I thought that was really, really nice. And I quite enjoyed seeing these sort of echoes of Angel Bob's in this mod as well. And so on that theme, we're then over here, we're bringing in tin and lead in order to make solder. I wonder if we'll start making lead-free solder later on. Probably not. But anyway, we're making solder here, once again in a foundry, and here I feel that does make sense. Then next up, we're making some copper cable, funnily enough, out of copper. That, again, that's nice and sensible, happy with that. And then we feed all of those bits and pieces in together. The copper cable, the fiberglass circuit boards, and the solder. Those go together, and we're using electromagnetic plants here because we have them, and that gets us that lovely 50% productivity bonus on the recipes from using the advanced machinery there. And, you know, we had them, we thought we might as well use them. And then that allows us to produce the electronic circuits. And the recipe for producing those requires 2 of each one of the components. And so Mike has sensibly come along and he's put the copper cables on the outside here because there's only one thing, and then the 2 things on the inside so it can be grabbed, so it can both be grabbed by the much faster inserter there. If we had one resource that required 10 or 20 or something like that compared to another one which required only 1 or 2, then again you put the resource that requires the larger numbers on the inside, even if that means you then have to restock the belt somewhere somehow, because with the much faster inserters here you can load them in much more quickly than you can even with a solid belt and multiple inserters loading in from the outside. Now I suspect that these inserters are a little bit faster than required, so each of these can pass over 5 items per second, and this machine is capable of using 2 items per second, so yeah, they're a little bit faster than required, but never mind. There's no harm in putting in some additional inserters to make sure everything's going to run. And so all of that, so from about here, I suppose, to about here, Mike set up in order to produce the green circuits. Now, sure, we're also pulling out the glass to make the glass bottles as well. That's fine, that's one extra thing that's coming from here. But all of this, otherwise, is going into making the green circuits. So this is what I was saying about it being a significantly larger process than the one we see in vanilla over on Norvis. But I'm kind of okay with that, especially as Foliax puts it in as something you do a bit later on in your sort of processing. So the initial steps are growing the trees and producing the actual metals themselves. And then after that, you then go in and start producing green circuits. So it feels a little bit later on. And of course, modded planets are all intended for slightly more advanced players. It's not going anything like as far as, say, Pyanodons, but it's a little bit of extra stretch for the more advanced player. I also note with some mild amusement that this is described as a correctly crafted electronic circuit. So I think the mod author shares my opinions on exactly how you make an electronic circuit out of merely copper and iron. The next thing to look at is a little bit of a hop and skip further down the bus because things got a little bit out of order here. But down here we are putting together the mixing stations, and these are things for dealing with all the various fluids and liquids and juices and sciences and things that are made on this planet, because there seems to be a lot of cocktail production going on here, and so you need a nice happy mixing station for this. And to put this together, well, we're going to need a perpetual motor, so we'll look into those in a moment. There's the arcane gear wheel and arcane machine arm that we saw at the end of the last episode that are being made basically out of aluminium and arcane cubes, so that's sort of fine, we've got those. Then there's the aluminium bars, which is one of the things that's being made on the underneath the bus, so we've got those coming through from the aluminium seeds, and that is allowing us to make a supply of mixing stations, which we're putting out into the red chests over here, ready for use elsewhere. So there's also those perpetual motion energy machines, or whatever they were called, so perpetual motors. And those are produced from mixing up some arcane cubes, iron bar, solder, which we've already seen, and holmium bar, and that will produce the motors, which can then be passed around here, as we said, to be made into the mixing stations. This is all fairly straightforward stuff. It's just bringing in various different inputs that we've made from earlier stages and then combining them together. However, at this stage, we're getting to things that have been processed quite a few times. So we've got the trees growing the various pods, which are then turned into the metal bars. A couple of those are then turned into solder. Then the solders are turned into the motors, and the motors are being turned into the mixing stations. So we've got quite a nice long chain of processing in order to get to the parts we actually want here. The metals and the arcane cubes require a little bit less fiddling with, but they are, again, they're a little way down the processing chain. I do notice that we seem to have run out of iron and holmium along here, which is a little bit of a concern, and perhaps we should take a look at that. Okay, the holmium problem is due to some missing belts here. This is I don't know how this ever worked, but it clearly did work at one point because we've made a huge number of these motors and made some of the mixing stations. This is going to be a fairly easy fix though. It's just that shouldn't be there, and that should. I expect it's something similar with the iron, because we have an iron supply down here, and then, oh yes, here we go, there's some missing underground belts here. I suspect what happened is at some point things were being fixed up and tidied up around here, and this got laid down. No, actually that doesn't really make any sense. It is a mystery to me how this ever works, but clearly someone was going through and trying to improve things and tidy it up, and they broke it in the process. So it's easily done, so I won't be too rude about it, but there we go. If we do this, and this, then the iron will be able to flow in, the holmium's already flowing in, there's one more needed, there we go. And now there we go, we've got all the metals, and we can start making these things again. That must have happened very, very recently, quite close to the end of the stream, because we've already got a full belt of these coming up to here. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards. Making these mixing machines allowed us to put some of them down here and start making the science packs. Now, unfortunately, we came into this planet with lots and lots of research done, all guns blazing, and so we sort of suddenly were able to just do all of at least the first tier of researches. The first research pack is the transportation research, which sounds vaguely appropriate. Presumably this is where you're going to get all of your belts and inserters inverters and so on from. And you'd hope that would mean they'd be very, very easy to make, but no, it still requires those quite complicated electronic circuits, along with some iron bars, research bottles, and some research catalyst. Let's go and have a look into that. And that's being made down here from sulfur, holmium, and what I think are called the scrap bars, although I'm going to keep calling them the rainbow bars because, well, just look at them. And then mixing, and then dissolving that in some water. So we're feeding all that into a foundry, and we've got all that coming together, and that allows us to make some research catalyst. This stuff appears to be a base factor or a base ingredient for all of the researches, because we're bringing that up and feeding it into all of the machines that are making the research packs along here. And so at some point we're probably going to need to expand that out and have a bit more of it. And so once we're making those, by mixing all those ingredients together, we've got our research fluid in its little flasks, which we can then pass around here and into the science lab that I was talking about in the last video. These ones are, as I said, vaguely similar to the ones we were seeing over on Norvis, except that they require a fuel, and the fuel they take is fruit juice. And so I set up a system somewhere back up the bus all the way over here to start producing that, and this is made out of Yamako and jelly nut. We bring those in straight from the trees, and then we can mix them together in a mixing station where we get the juice out of them, along with the brim fruit, and a little glass bottle, which is made in a foundry over here from the glass. So this is being done over here because there's a nice steady flow of glass and the fruit, and there's lots of space available over here for doing it. And we mix in some water as well to dilute it, because you don't want your fruit juice to be too overpowering, and then we can drop it out onto a belt here to be taken away to be used for science purposes. It's also worth mentioning that the fruit juice has an additional effect. Because it's got jelly nut in it, it also has quite a big effect on your speed. And at the moment, I'm running around at normal speed. I don't have my exoskeletons turned on, because that makes a crazy difference all on its own and makes it rather hard to tell what's going on. But we've done a number of science researches that have increased our normal movement speed. However, if I now drink one of these fruit juices, you can see that I'm moving significantly faster. So they do give you quite a nice boost there. And they've also given me these fetching little green splodges flying around me as well to show that I'm moving more quickly. If I now also turn the exoskeletons on, well, then you can see that things get a little bit ridiculous. The fruit juice is now worn off again. That was some quite good timing. If I now trigger that again, then I move even more quickly. And at this point, it's frankly ridiculous. This would be extremely handy for exploration, admittedly, but it would also be very, very awkward for trying to build anything and move around even remotely subtly. You can see each time I tap a key, I'm moving about 5 squares at a time, and that's not very conducive to trying to move the character around subtly. Because a lot of this fruit stuff goes off, I've put in some filters at the top that will take away any spoilage that's produced by the fruit decaying and take it away, dump it down onto the disposal belts to be taken away and then probably turned into more seeds, to be honest, because that's what we usually do with spoilage around here. I have to admit, done the rather simple design along here where I've just put in a splitter at the end rather than putting in a nice loop that will pass it round and round and round and make sure that you clean out any of the fruit as it goes off. I don't know if this is going to be a problem, but if it is, it's going to be fairly easy to fix this, because I could remove some of these pieces of belt up here, run this all the way up to there, split this one off like that, then run this back down here, and then from the bottom here, I'd then want to loop this round and join it in over here as a high priority input with any spoilage being stripped out first. Now, the thing that's going to make that a little bit more difficult is that I haven't left an enormous amount of space down here. I would then have to decide whether to impinge on the bus down here, which I don't think is a problem, because this part of the bus is for things that haven't even been invented yet, like all of the all these later parts over here. These seem to be doing internal pass-through systems. So we've got the circuit boards being passed through here, we've got the science packs being passed through, and so on. So I think it would be okay to then just bring this around, have these a little bit further down, and then have a splitter in there to bring this one in. That's something I may need to do at some point in the future if we decide it's going to be a problem, especially as there's quite a lot of extra spoilage coming in every so often on these belts, because you can see here there's a lot of the fruit is going off on one side of the belt or the other. So I think we might need to have a bit of a play around with that. But at the moment, so far, it has worked out quite absolutely fine. I'm just a little bit concerned about the future proofing. But if I was, then I could drop in a splitter there like this, and then I would filter out any spoilage to the left, and then bring another belt round like this. I guess I'd then need to move this bit down to about there, and then have this belt come up like that, and put in another splitter there with an input priority on the left, and then a couple of pieces of belt like that. And there we go. That would then give me that complete loop system that would ensure that we always took away any spoilage and disposed of it, just like this. And so you can see that, yeah, that spoilage is now getting dumped out and down this underground belt, and we've just got nice fresh fruit, well, fresh-ish fruit going around there. Fruit that at least hasn't rotted, which is a lot better than what we might have risked beforehand. So I think this is probably going to be worth doing, especially as it's so simple to implement. The same thing could be done on the other side in exactly the same way, and just only bring in the bottles and the fresh fruit when required. Anyway, I was talking about the fruit juices. Yes, that's brought all the way down here, where it can then be fed into the labs, and the labs will then run quite nicely off it. That's very good. And we notice there's a special type of module on this planet that you can get, which is the tolerance module. And I feel like this is kind of feeding into the slightly boozy theme on this planet. So we've got an artificially induced mixed drinks tolerance here, where you take in speed module and some other components there. You get one of these modules, and these give you a massive increase on energy consumption, a big increase on speed, and a noticeable increase on productivity. It's not a huge one, but it's a slight one, and you can get that up all the way up to 5% with legendary modules if you so desire. And so the fact they're called tolerance modules does amuse me quite a bit, and so we'd like to put some of those into these machines when we're finally able to make speed modules. And I think we just about are now, but it's there. But we haven't yet, so that's something to work on. And so that's one science pack up and running, and that basically takes in iron and green circuits and bottles. This one takes in tungsten and green circuits and bottles in order to produce the machine research, which I guess is going to allow us to make things like assembly machines or chemical plants or some of the slightly more advanced machinery that we might want to have on this planet. Maybe we'll even discover electricity through those, I don't know. But as I was saying in the last video, I do want to play through this planet again to see how all of the resources are supposed to go, rather than the slightly weird way that everything has gone when we came in with 10 different planets already completed and all of the toys from those planets. So those are being fed in along the other side of the belt along here, exactly as you'd expect. We've then continued on with the general production of science packs, and so the next one follows a similar pattern. We're bringing in a bottle and a green circuit, and this time we're bringing in fruit juice in order to make the plant and material research. So again, same sort of idea. Next up is the same but with uranium for the power research. That makes a certain amount of sense. Then we're starting to bring in arcane gears, so that's something that's gone through an extra... I was going to say, actually no it hasn't. I was going to say that's gone through an extra step of processing, but it kind of hasn't, because you make the gears straight out of the cubes, whereas you have to make the uranium and so on all the way back up out of the various tree products. Oh, but that said, you do need aluminium for these as well, so that has gone through a bit of extra processing. So maybe this is slightly more advanced. And that's going to allow us to make optimization research, again, science packs onto the bus down here. And then finally, we're bringing in lead bars in order to make violence research. So that's going to that's your military science, I guess, with another name put on it. And this brings up another thing, another example where I talked about yesterday about how all of the different metals are produced in exactly the same way, well, except for aluminium. Over here, you can see that all of the science packs are produced in basically the same way. They're all, you need green circuits and you need bottles and you need a metal bar or a bar of some sort, and you need the research juice. And then it's exactly the same for every single one of the sciences. I feel this is, again, a little bit of a shame. As you get further into the game, the research packs should become a bit more complicated and a bit more difficult to build. But that is, again, something that I hope will be built on in future versions of the mod. And so all of this was built up using some heavy copy and paste by myself and Sophia. I think he designed the first one as far as I remember. Yes, he designed the first one, then I did the second one, and then we probably more or less... Oh no, Tristan did the third one, or at least placed them all in. And I think maybe then it was me and Sophia who did the wiring up of the belts. No, it appears to be Tristan. Okay, I take it back. Tristan did a lot of the more advanced science packs over here. But as I said, advanced science pack seems to just mean making sure you put in uranium or arcane gear wheels instead of iron or tungsten. So it's similar sort of ideas. Tristan then put the lab system together all the way up here as well. And so we've been sort of calling that phase 1 of the science. So we've made up the green circuits, and then we've made up all of these science packs. And tier 1 science production takes in, as you can see here, one green circuit, 2 of whatever the particular material for that science pack is, 1 research bottle, and 25 catalysts to make 1 science pack. Fair enough. But then there's also tier 2, which takes in 1 red circuit, 1 engine unit, 2 of the material, and 5 research bottles and 50 catalysts in order to make 5 transportation researches. So this is the, as I say, the more advanced method of making these science packs, and it's a bit more complicated because it requires you to make engine units and advanced circuits, but you do get a lot more of your research packs out in exchange for it. And I guess that's fairly similar to the more advanced methods of making some of the other things. So for example, holmium bar, as we saw in the last video, can be made out of 20 barbs, and you get 5 barbs out and some spoilage, okay. Or you can do some extra research, and then you can do the one that gives you, from 20 barbs, gets you 10 bars and 10 spoilage. So that's twice as good, you're getting twice as much out. But you need to do some extra researches, and then you need to go in and use chemical plants instead. So at that point you'll have to build chemical plants, and I suspect if we just dropped in on this planet, that'd be a bit of a challenge. An interesting side effect, which I didn't notice in the last video, but Tristan pointed out when he was reviewing it, is that making the holmium bars, if you make them in a high processor, then it is indeed 20 turns into 5. But because we're making them in foundries, which has that 50% base productivity bonus, 20 actually turns into 7.5. So instead of this recipe being twice as good, going from 5 to 10, it's actually only a third better because it goes from 7.5 to 10 and requires a bit of the rebuilding and bringing in of chemical plants and so on. And that, once again, is the side effect of us not doing this as a starter planet, but is an interesting point and means that it's not quite as much of a bonus as we originally thought. Doing the tertiary recipe, the one we looked at very, very briefly because we can't do this yet, is still going to be a significant bonus though, because even though it requires dealing with the bioflux and the extra seeds, you're going to get the 50% productivity bonus from using a biochamber. So that's going to be a tripling over the previous recipe, because the previous one will go from 20 to 10, this one will go from 20 to 30, and so it's going to be significantly better and very worth doing. However, in normal play, you wouldn't actually be able to do this until you'd then been off to Gleba and potentially come back again. So at that point, I wonder if you actually would be doing that, or whether you'd be then just going, well, this planet's finished, it's running well enough, I don't feel the need to make any more stuff because we don't need any more of those weird science packs it's producing. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out when we finish off this planet. So that comes back to us requiring all these advanced components, like advanced circuits and engine units, in order to make the researchers packs in a slightly more efficient way. And there is also a tertiary tier as well, which uses even more complicated things in order to make 10 of them at a time. So that's going to be a stretch goal for later on. And here is the research that will unlock that additional recipe for making these science packs. And the notable thing about this is that it also says that researching this technology will remove the previous tiers. So when we come up with the ways of producing these science packs with the new recipe, so using the red circuits, we're also going to lose the way to make them using the green circuits. But we sort of have to do that because there are a lot of other researches that are gated behind these ones. So things like getting the biochamber and the recycler and the foundry, or at least the Foliax versions of all of those, and then further equipment further down the list as well. All of those are behind us unlocking the new recipes for the science packs, and so we're sort of going to be forced into doing that. And as you can see here, there are a lot of things that are gated behind this process. So we're going to be wanting to unlock those reasonably quickly, and then make sure we then move over to being able to produce all the science packs with the more advanced recipes as well. And so, in order to start trying to work on the tier 2, I started putting together the red circuits on this planet. And the red circuit recipe is fairly standard, except that it takes in solder, but is otherwise exactly the same as the normal recipe. So I don't know if there's anything stopping you doing the normal recipe in one of the Foliax assembly machines, whatever machine I'm supposed to be using here. But as it is, we could quite easily have said, no, do the normal red circuit recipe, don't bother with the solder, just make it out of the copper cables, the plastic and the green circuits. But we haven't done that because we like to sort of play along and go with the intent of the mod author to an extent where possible. So we are using the Foliax recipe here, and that means we need to produce lots and lots of bits and pieces to go in here. Copper cable is a solved problem, we know how to make that, and we've got a supply of that coming over here. I did just literally copy and paste this from Mike's green circuit design. The green circuits are being brought in as well, and we reckon that we're probably going to mostly stop needing green circuits because we're going to stop using these recipes for making them, and this seems to be where all the green circuits are going. So it was okay to pull the green circuits off to make red circuits. If that turns out to be a problem later on, then I guess we'll put in an extra green circuit production facility and feed some of them backwards, but I don't think it's going to be. I think now that we're starting to make red circuits, we won't need the green circuits in particularly large quantities for anything else, and so it'll probably be okay. But we do also need plastic. And plastic on this planet is made out of bioresin, which you saw us making earlier, and bitumen bar, which we're making underneath the bus from bitumen trees. Once again, this is like, as I said, ages and ages ago when we were looking at, I think it might have been lignumis at the time, I don't remember. But since plastic is just sort of big long chains of hydrocarbons, it makes sense that there are lots and lots of organic ways to make it, and so having another one where you use your bioresin and your bitumen to mix them together in a chemical plant and produce plastic, that feels reasonably logical, as logical as anything else is, and so we've got a nice steady supply of that coming out to feed the red circuit production over here. It's available to be made into other things in the future if necessary, but at the moment that hasn't become required. I don't know why these belts are running backwards. Oh, probably because we're going to be producing more science packs on them or something like that, so we'll be feeding them back along the bus to go to the labs that we've already put in. And that brings us to the end of our progress so far from the first stream on Foliax. And I have to say, I've been quite enjoying this planet. It's got lots of interesting stuff on it. Like every other mod we've done so far, it's felt suitably different from stuff we've played with before, and it's nice to see sort of a very, very different process where everything is produced from trees, and then you've got the various processing steps, and then you have to try and find ways to turn the stuff from the trees into things that approximate normal science packs, and then and so on. So yeah, I've been quite enjoying this planet. I'm looking forward to getting back into it in the next stream, where I'm sure we'll at the very least get in the second tier of all the research packs, probably get Blue Circus up and running, and maybe we'll actually be able to start thinking about leaving this planet and working out what sort of exciting toys we've got from here that we're going to be able to use elsewhere. If you'd like to come along and see that, we'll be streaming from 7:30 PM UK time every Monday. Okay, we'll probably have done that by the time you actually see this video, but we'll be carrying on with another planet and there'll be more excitement for you to come along and see. As I was saying in the last video, I do also intend to come back and do this planet again from scratch without coming in with all of the advanced toys, just to see what it's like, because I think we've done it a little bit of a disservice coming in with advanced things like the foundries and the electromagnetic machines and the blue belts and everything else that we've come in with. And so that'll be coming out as one of the Thursday or Friday videos sometime in the future, so please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. If you fancy giving Planetary Pioneers a try yourself, then you can grab the mod from the Factorio mod portal, install it, you'll get all of our planets, all our quality of life mods, and if you want to try and play in the same universe as us, use the seed 11111, and you should get pretty much the same planets to play on, and they should look very familiar when you land on them all. I'll also be back streaming something else on Wednesday. Currently I'm still playing through Foundry, but by the time this video goes live, I suspect I might well have finished it and be playing something else, so that'll be exciting to find out, so keep an eye out for the Wednesday streams as well. And as I said, the videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday. So once again, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and my insights so far into Foliax, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.